Welcome. Before we uncover this incredible true story, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because we've spent countless hours digging into real events and historical records. This story is about a young black boy in 1859 whose talent at the piano stunned everyone around him. A prodigy whose music spoke louder than words and whose life challenged every expectation of his time. The boy's early life was a mixture of hardship and hidden brilliance, shaped by the harsh realities of his environment and the subtle nurturing that would eventually reveal his extraordinary gift. Born in 1859, in a small rural town, his family lived under the constant strain of social and economic oppression, with very little access to education or resources. Despite these constraints, his household was filled with the quiet rhythms of daily life, and it was in that rhythm that he first encountered music. He spent countless hours near the old, slightly out of tune piano that belonged to the family who owned the land where his parents worked. Though it was battered and neglected, it became his sanctuary, a place where the boy could escape the noise of the world and immerse himself in sound. Even as a toddler, neighbors and family members began to notice something unusual about him. While other children played with toys or mimicked the adults around them, he would sit for hours at the piano, pressing keys experimentally and listening with intense focus. His small hands, though untrained, seemed to find harmony in dissonance. The notes that emerged were unlike anything those around him had ever heard, patterns that suggested an innate understanding of melody, rhythm, and dynamics. By the time he could speak in complete sentences, he could already play simple tunes from memory, often improvising variations that were startlingly sophisticated for a child of his age. His parents, though illiterate and uneducated themselves, recognized the extraordinary potential in their son. They encouraged him as best they could, providing a safe space for him to explore the piano whenever it was available. They understood that his talent was more than a pastime. It was a gift that could shape his future in ways they could barely imagine. Meanwhile, the local community, initially skeptical, began to take notice. Word spread quickly that the black boy who barely spoke could play music that rivaled anything performed by trained musicians in town. Even at this young age, he exhibited an almost uncanny ability to replicate complex pieces he had only heard once. Visitors to the house would hum or play a few bars of a song, and he would repeat it flawlessly, often embellishing it with intricate flourishes that made it sound even richer. His capacity for learning by ear, combined with his natural creativity, set him apart from anyone else in the community. People were fascinated not just by the notes he played, but by the feeling behind them, the way each performance seemed to carry a depth, an emotional understanding beyond his years. His early life was also marked by silence in speech, which contrasted sharply with his verbal virtuosity through music. While he was quiet and reserved in conversation, his fingers seemed to speak a language all their own. This duality only heightened the sense of mystery surrounding him. Those who heard him play often described the experience as almost spiritual, as though the music itself was a bridge between the mundane world he lived in and something far greater and more profound. By the time he reached the age of 7, it was clear that his early years had laid the foundation for something extraordinary. The boy had developed not only technical skill, but also an innate emotional intelligence in his performances. He could convey joy, sorrow, longing, and triumph through his music in ways that left listeners breathless. His early life, filled with hardship, stillness, and the quiet nurturing of his gift, was the crucible that forged the beginnings of a prodigy, a child whose story would challenge the limits of what people believed a young black boy in 1859 could achieve. Every note he played in those formative years carried the weight of a hidden genius, and the small, worn piano in that modest household became the stage upon which his extraordinary journey would begin, a journey that would leave an indelible mark on all who heard the silent piano prodigy play. From a very young age, the boy's extraordinary musical talent became impossible to ignore. By the time he was barely able to tie his own shoes, he could already play melodies that would confound adults who had spent years studying music. What set him apart was not just his technical ability, but his intuitive understanding of the structure and emotion behind every piece. While other children learned songs note by note, laboriously memorizing each bar, he seemed to hear the essence of a tune and reproduce it instinctively, adding his own flourishes as if the piano itself were an extension of his own mind. This natural aptitude suggested that his talent was not learned in the traditional sense, but was something innate, a gift that flowed through him effortlessly. It was during this period that he first began to be recognized by those outside his immediate family. Neighbors and passers-by, initially drawn to the faint sounds of music drifting from the household, would often stop to listen, astonished that such complexity could come from a boy so young. Some described hearing him play harmonies and counterpoints that rivaled compositions by the masters, all while seeming to improvise with ease. His tiny fingers, moving with precision and confidence, produced a depth of sound that carried both technical mastery and emotional nuance, a combination rarely seen even in trained adult musicians. His talent quickly caught the attention of the local community, and stories began to circulate about the young prodigy. People spoke of a child who could play entire pieces after hearing them only once, who could sit at the piano for hours without tiring, and whose music could elicit tears or laughter from listeners who had never known him personally. Some began to attribute almost supernatural qualities to his abilities, saying that it was as though the piano itself spoke through him. His reputation spread from neighborhood to neighborhood, drawing curious listeners from further afield, including teachers, clergy, and even some wealthy families eager to witness the prodigy for themselves. His parents, aware of their son's gift, tried to provide him with as many opportunities to play as possible, despite the limitations imposed by their circumstances. They sought out anyone who might help him refine his skills, often relying on informal lessons and guidance from traveling musicians or sympathetic locals. Even without formal training, the boy absorbed instruction at an astonishing rate. He understood musical theory intuitively, grasping concepts like chord progressions, scales, and rhythm in ways that would have taken other children years to comprehend. Within a short time, he was not merely replicating pieces he heard, he was interpreting them, transforming them into something uniquely his own. As his reputation grew, he began performing for small gatherings, first for family and neighbors, then for larger audiences who came specifically to witness his talent. These performances were often informal, but they left a profound impression on all who attended. Adults marveled at the technical skill of the boy, but they were equally captivated by the expressiveness of his playing. There was a maturity in his music far beyond his years, a sense of storytelling and emotional depth that seemed to transcend his age. For listeners, it was clear that this was no ordinary child. He was a prodigy in the truest sense, a rare and remarkable talent, whose gift had already begun to alter perceptions of what a child, and particularly a black child in the American South, could achieve. By the age of 9, it became evident that his abilities were more than a curiosity or a fleeting phenomenon. Those who had first encountered him were now insisting that he be given every chance to develop his skills, even as societal and racial barriers threatened to limit his opportunities. Musicians, teachers, and community leaders debated how best to support him, recognizing both the promise of his talent and the extraordinary challenge of nurturing it in a time and place that was hostile to the idea of a black child achieving greatness. Yet despite these obstacles, the boy continued to play, practice, and grow, his natural talent guiding him with remarkable precision and grace. It was during these formative years that the foundation of his legacy was established. His performances, however small or informal, demonstrated not just technical ability, but the power of music to communicate emotion, transcend circumstance, and challenge expectations. Every melody he played reinforced the extraordinary truth that this silent piano prodigy was destined to leave a mark on the world that would resonate far beyond the walls of his modest home, and far beyond the time in which he lived. By the time the boy began performing beyond his immediate household, the reactions of the local community were a mixture of astonishment, admiration, and in some cases, disbelief. When he first played for gatherings of neighbors and visiting families, people expected a child's naive attempt at music, perhaps clumsy or incomplete. Instead, what they heard was astonishing music that carried the clarity, complexity, and emotional depth of someone far older and trained in ways that no child his age could possibly have learned. The melodies flowed effortlessly. Intricate harmonies intertwined naturally, and each note seemed deliberate, precise, and full of meaning. Listeners were left speechless, often moved to tears, and many described feeling as though the boy's music communicated things words could not. Word of his extraordinary talent spread quickly, and soon, his audience expanded to include local community leaders, church musicians, and even wealthy plantation families. Some invited him to play at social gatherings, hoping to witness the prodigy themselves, while others were skeptical, unable to believe that such skill could come from someone so young, let alone from a black child living under the constraints of the antebellum South. His performances became small events of note, with neighbors traveling for miles to hear him play, and each time he exceeded all expectations, performing both memorized pieces and improvised compositions that astonished even seasoned musicians. His reputation was fueled not only by his technical ability, but by the emotional expressiveness of his playing. He had a rare gift for interpreting music in ways that resonated deeply with listeners, conveying joy, sorrow, longing, and hope through the movements of his small hands across the keys. People said that, when he played, it was as though he was telling a story, one that transcended language and spoke directly to the heart. Unlike other children who might play mechanically, he seemed to understand the purpose behind every note, the flow of each phrase, and the impact of silence and pause. His music was alive, vibrant, and hauntingly mature, leaving those who heard it both awed and humbled. Even those who were initially skeptical could not deny the brilliance of his performances. Accounts from the time describe listeners testing him by playing unfamiliar pieces or humming melodies they had never taught him, only to have the boy reproduce them perfectly on the piano, often embellishing them with subtle variations that demonstrated creativity and insight beyond his years. Musicians remarked on his ability to play complex arrangements, navigate difficult chord progressions, and maintain perfect rhythm and expression, feats that would have been impressive for any adult, let alone a child who had not received formal training. His performances also began to challenge societal perceptions. In an era when racial prejudices were rigid and opportunities for black children were severely limited, his talent could not be ignored. The community witnessed firsthand that his abilities rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, those of trained musicians who had spent years studying. This undeniable display of genius forced many to confront their own assumptions, even if only privately. His music became a subtle form of resistance, a demonstration that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that talent and creativity were not bound by race, status, or circumstance. As he continued performing, his growing reputation created opportunities that his family had never imagined. While formal musical training was largely inaccessible to a black child in his situation, sympathetic musicians and educators began to offer guidance when possible. Some offered lessons, others lent sheet music, and a few attempted to teach him more advanced theory. Though these opportunities were limited, the boy absorbed instruction with remarkable speed, integrating new concepts seamlessly into his improvisations and performances. His adaptability, combined with his innate gift, allowed him to grow rapidly as a musician, further solidifying his status as a prodigy. Beyond the technical and social implications of his talent, his performances had a profound impact on those who witnessed them emotionally and spiritually. People reported feeling transported while listening, as though the music created a bridge between the human experience and something larger, something almost divine. His ability to convey emotion through music, paired with the mystery of his youth and circumstances, created an aura of wonder and reverence around him. Every gathering where he played became more than a recital. It became a shared experience that left an indelible mark on all who were present. Through these early public performances, the boy's story became one not only of individual talent, but also of resilience, creativity, and the power of music to transcend social barriers. The community's reactions, from awe to disbelief, from skepticism to admiration, reflected the transformative effect of witnessing a child who could communicate complex ideas and emotions through a piano, a feat that many believed should have been impossible. His growing reputation as a musical prodigy was solidified during these performances, laying the foundation for a legacy that would continue to inspire those who heard of him long after his early years, proving that extraordinary talent can flourish, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. The boy's journey as a musical prodigy was not without immense challenges, particularly because of the racial and societal barriers that surrounded him. In 1859, the American South was a place of deeply entrenched prejudice, and opportunities for black children were severely restricted, both legally and socially. Even a child with extraordinary talent like his faced constant limitations simply because of the color of his skin. While his skill at the piano drew admiration and awe, it also provoked fear, skepticism, and even hostility among those who could not reconcile his brilliance with the rigid expectations of the time. In many ways, his talent became both a blessing and a burden, opening doors while simultaneously attracting scrutiny and resistance. From a young age, he was often denied formal instruction and access to musical resources that white children could freely pursue. Teachers and musicians who might have nurtured his talent were limited by societal norms or fear of repercussions. His family relied on sympathetic neighbors and informal lessons, but even these were sporadic and difficult to sustain. The boy had to navigate a world in which his genius was recognized, yet constantly constrained by the prejudices of others. This environment forced him to rely heavily on his own innate ability and perseverance, fostering a level of independence and creativity that would define his approach to music throughout his life. Despite these barriers, he found ways to perform and refine his skills in secret or in safe, trusted spaces, within the confines of his home, or in the quiet corners of sympathetic households. He practiced for hours, honing his technique and developing a personal style that combined natural instinct with the limited instruction he received. The lack of formal training forced him to innovate, to experiment with harmonies, rhythms, and improvisation in ways that many trained musicians never considered. This necessity bred a unique musical voice, one that was both technically sophisticated and deeply expressive, capturing the attention of all who were fortunate enough to hear him. Outside the home, his talent often drew mixed reactions. Some community members marveled at his skill, praising the clarity, precision, and emotional depth of his performances. Others were threatened by the idea that a black child could achieve such mastery, particularly in an era when social hierarchies were strictly enforced. Some questioned whether he could have possibly learned to play with such skill without some form of supernatural aid or deception, while others whispered that his talent challenged the natural order, making them uneasy or suspicious. These reactions added layers of complexity to his early career, as he had to navigate admiration and fear simultaneously, often without the ability to defend himself or assert his rights to the recognition he had earned. The social restrictions of the time also limited his audience and venues. While white families might invite him to perform, many events and institutions remained closed to him, and he was often unable to access stages or concert halls where his talent might have been more broadly recognized. This meant that his exposure was largely confined to private homes, small gatherings, and the limited circle of people who were willing to support his gift despite societal norms. Yet even within these constraints, his music spoke volumes, and stories of his extraordinary ability continued to circulate, slowly building a reputation that transcended the boundaries imposed by prejudice. His challenges were not purely external. Growing up in a world that constantly reminded him of his limitations could have stifled his confidence, but instead, it seemed to fuel his determination. He poured himself into the piano, finding in it a form of expression and freedom that the outside world could not restrict. Every note he played became a statement of resilience and defiance, demonstrating that talent and creativity could flourish even under the weight of systemic oppression. The intensity with which he approached his craft reflected both his passion and the urgency of proving himself in a society that often denied him opportunities. In addition, the boy had to contend with the expectations placed upon him by those who recognized his gift. Patrons and local families who admired his music sometimes pressured him to perform for entertainment or social prestige rather than for personal growth. These pressures could be overwhelming, yet he navigated them with a maturity beyond his years, learning to balance the demands of performance with the need to continue developing his skills on his own terms. This balance, though difficult, helped him maintain artistic integrity while still captivating audiences who were increasingly fascinated by his talent. Through all these obstacles, the boy's talent continued to flourish. The very barriers designed to limit him instead seemed to sharpen his creativity, deepen his emotional expression, and strengthen his resolve. His early experiences with racial and social discrimination not only shaped his character, but also infused his music with a poignancy and authenticity that resonated with every listener. By overcoming these challenges, he became not only a prodigious musician, but also a symbol of resilience, a reminder that extraordinary talent can rise above even the most restrictive circumstances. Ultimately, his story illustrates the intersection of genius and adversity, showing how an extraordinary individual can shine despite societal limitations. The young black boy who played like Mozart in 1859 was more than a musical prodigy. He was a testament to human potential, creativity, and perseverance in the face of systemic barriers that sought to suppress it. The challenges he endured in accessing instruction, performing publicly, and navigating prejudice helped shape the remarkable legacy he would leave behind, one note at a time. The boy's recognition by musicians, teachers, and other figures of the era marked a turning point in his young life, though it came with both promise and challenges. Despite his extraordinary talent being apparent to all who heard him play, gaining formal mentorship or serious instruction was exceptionally difficult due to the racial and societal constraints of the time. Yet, word of his abilities spread beyond his immediate community, reaching those who understood the value of exceptional musical talent and were willing to risk societal disapproval to nurture it. Some local musicians, intrigued and impressed by the precision, emotion, and complexity of his performances, sought him out to offer guidance. These interactions were often informal, lessons held in private homes or behind closed doors, but they gave him exposure to techniques, theory, and methods that were otherwise inaccessible. The boy demonstrated a remarkable capacity for learning and absorbing instruction far beyond what most adults could achieve. He could take a concept introduced by a teacher, such as a scale, chord progression, or musical ornamentation, and instantly integrate it into his own playing. But more than replication, he transformed the instruction, adapting it to his natural style and emotional interpretation. He wasn't just learning music, he was internalizing it and reshaping it into something uniquely his own. Observers were often astonished not only by his skill but by his ability to innovate within the classical frameworks they tried to teach him, effectively bridging the gap between formal musical knowledge and innate creative genius. Even as some doors opened for him, he faced the challenge of societal prejudice. While teachers and musicians recognized his talent, they were aware of the limitations imposed by the era. Public performances in larger venues or opportunities to study formally at prestigious institutions were nearly impossible for a black child in the 1850s. This meant that while his abilities were nurtured privately, he remained largely confined to performing for smaller, trusted audiences. Each performance became a delicate negotiation between opportunity and safety, a chance to showcase his talent while navigating the limitations imposed by the rigid social hierarchy of the South. Despite these constraints, the boy's recognition by musicians of the time elevated his reputation significantly. People were drawn to him not only because of the technical precision of his playing, but also because of the emotional resonance that seemed to emanate from each note. Musicians commented that his music carried a maturity far beyond his years, as though he were channeling experiences, stories, and emotions that others could only convey after decades of life. The combination of technical mastery, emotional depth, and natural improvisation set him apart, leaving many who heard him convinced that they were witnessing a once-in-a-generation talent. Moreover, the support of a few sympathetic mentors provided more than technical guidance. It gave him affirmation and a sense of purpose. He began to understand that his ability was not merely a hobby or curiosity, but a rare gift that had the potential to leave a lasting impact. The guidance he received helped him refine his compositions and performances, teaching him how to structure pieces, manage rhythm, and enhance expression without losing the spontaneous brilliance that made his playing extraordinary. These mentors, while limited in number, played a pivotal role in shaping his early musical development, balancing formal instruction with encouragement to trust his instincts. At the same time, his recognition brought subtle pressures. With more people aware of his talent came higher expectations. Families and communities looked to him to perform on special occasions, to entertain, and to demonstrate his genius. While these performances validated his skills, they also introduced stress, as any mistake could be magnified, and his audience often included those who were less supportive or more skeptical. Yet, through these experiences, he developed not only technical skill, but also poise and confidence, the ability to perform under scrutiny and to communicate through music even in challenging circumstances. This period of recognition also marked the beginning of his emerging legacy. His talent, once known only within his household and local neighborhood, began to influence a wider circle of listeners and musicians. Stories of his abilities circulated through towns, reaching individuals who could not witness him firsthand, but who spread the word through letters and conversation. His reputation became an intangible form of mentorship itself, inspiring other young musicians and challenging prevailing assumptions about talent, race, and the potential of children in a society determined to impose limits. Ultimately, this recognition by musicians and teachers was crucial in shaping both the boy's development and the perception of his extraordinary abilities. It provided him with tools, validation, and a framework for growth, while also highlighting the constraints imposed by the society in which he lived. It reinforced his status as a prodigy, demonstrating that genius could not be contained by prejudice or circumstance. In these formative years, he not only honed his skill, but began to leave an impression on the world, an impression that would resonate long after his early performances, marking him as a silent piano prodigy whose talent rivaled that of the greatest composers of the era. The boy's early performances left a profound mark on everyone who had the chance to hear him play, and the impact of those experiences went far beyond mere admiration for technical skill. From the very first time, he performed for neighbors and local community members. It became clear that his music carried an emotional weight and maturity that was extraordinary for a child of his age. Each note he played seemed deliberate, each pause intentional, and the subtleties of his phrasing conveyed complex feelings that listeners struggled to put into words. While other children might perform mechanically, following a set sequence of notes, he played with intuition and emotional insight, transforming even simple melodies into moving narratives that captivated his audience. As his reputation grew, so did the audiences who came to hear him. People traveled from neighboring towns and plantations, eager to witness the child, whose talent was said to rival the great composers of the age. His performances were often informal, held in homes, small halls, or even open spaces on the grounds of local families. Yet the intimacy of these settings made the experience all the more powerful. Listeners were struck by the contrast between his quiet demeanor and the commanding presence he exhibited when seated at the piano. He could fill a room with sound and emotion without ever raising his voice, relying solely on the instrument and his innate ability to communicate through it. One of the most remarkable aspects of his early performances was his ability to improvise. While he could faithfully reproduce pieces he had heard or been shown, he often took liberties, creating variations, embellishments, and entirely new passages that elevated the music into something uniquely his own. Audiences were frequently astonished by these improvisations, which displayed not only technical mastery, but also an intuitive understanding of musical theory. He could navigate complex harmonies, shifting keys seamlessly, and maintain perfect timing and rhythm, all while adding expressive touches that made the music feel alive. Those who heard him often remarked that the boy's performances seemed to tell a story, conveying emotions that transcended age, language, and social status. The emotional impact of his playing was amplified by the context in which he performed. Growing up as a black child in the antebellum South, his very presence at the piano challenged societal expectations and prejudices. Listeners could not ignore the juxtaposition of his extraordinary talent with the social limitations imposed upon him. Some were inspired, seeing in his music a glimpse of what human potential could achieve when unbound by discrimination. Others were unsettled, struggling to reconcile the child's genius with the rigid social hierarchies of the time. In every case, his music left an impression that lingered long after the last note faded, provoking reflection, admiration, and sometimes awe. His early performances also shaped the trajectory of his development as a musician. Each audience provided feedback, both overt and subtle, that he absorbed instinctively. He learned to read the room, to adjust dynamics and pacing, and to explore different emotional registers, depending on the listener's reactions. These experiences not only refined his technical abilities, but also enhanced his understanding of performance as a form of communication. The young prodigy was developing not just as a pianist, but as an artist capable of connecting with others through music, a skill that would distinguish him throughout his life. Beyond the technical and emotional aspects, these performances contributed to his emerging legacy. Stories of the silent piano prodigy spread through word of mouth, capturing the imagination of people far beyond his immediate community. Accounts of the child who could play like Mozart circulated in letters, conversations, and local gatherings, creating a reputation that would follow him for years to come. Even those who never heard him play in person were intrigued by the tales of his ability, and this growing recognition set the stage for future opportunities and a lasting impact on the perception of musical talent. Importantly, his early performances also underscored the resilience and determination required to pursue his gift in a society that offered little support to a black child. Despite limited access to formal instruction, resources, and public platforms, he continued to refine his abilities, often practicing for hours alone or with the guidance of a few sympathetic mentors. The audiences who witnessed his talent were not only spectators, but participants in a remarkable process. They were seeing the development of a young genius whose music would challenge social norms and leave an indelible mark on all who experienced it. In essence, his early performances were a crucible in which talent, perseverance, and emotional expression combined to reveal the extraordinary depth of his gift. They demonstrated that genius could emerge in the most unexpected circumstances, that music could transcend social and racial boundaries, and that a child's voice, though silent in words, could resonate powerfully through the language of the piano. These early moments were not merely steps in his development. They were defining experiences that shaped him, inspired audiences, and established the foundation for a legacy that would endure for generations. The impact of these performances extended beyond the immediate thrill or amazement of those present. They served as a testament to the boy's resilience, creativity, and humanity, offering a rare glimpse of what could be achieved when extraordinary talent met determination and passion. Every early recital, no matter how small or informal, reinforced the truth that this silent piano prodigy was not just a child with a gift, but a figure whose artistry and courage would leave an enduring impression on everyone who heard him play. The boy's early brilliance at the piano was only the beginning of a legacy that would endure far beyond the modest settings in which he first performed. As he grew, the impression he left on listeners expanded into a broader influence, shaping both the way people perceived musical talent and the possibilities for black musicians in a society that had long sought to limit them. His gift was not merely a personal accomplishment. It became a symbol of what could be achieved despite oppression, a testament to human creativity and resilience, and a story that would inspire those who heard of it for generations to come. Even in his youth, people began to recognize that his musical ability was not fleeting or circumstantial. Every performance reinforced the notion that he was a true prodigy, someone whose talent seemed preordained and whose emotional depth in music surpassed his chronological age. Those who witnessed him play often remarked on the precision of his technique, the fluidity of his improvisations, and the extraordinary way he could convey feeling through every note. His music was more than entertainment. It was a revelation, a statement of possibility that challenged the expectations of his time. Communities that had once underestimated him began to see him as a figure of inspiration, a living demonstration that genius could emerge from the most unexpected places. The boy's influence extended to other young musicians as well. Children who had limited exposure to formal training looked to him as proof that talent could flourish even without privilege. His improvisational style and intuitive grasp of melody became examples for others to emulate, showing that music was not just a set of rules to follow, but a language to explore creatively. In many ways, he became a quiet mentor, his performances teaching others the power of observation, practice, and emotional engagement with an instrument. Even those adults who had more formal education in music found themselves inspired by the originality and sophistication of his playing, recognizing that the boy's artistry could not be confined to conventional expectations. Over time, the story of his talent and perseverance began to circulate beyond his immediate community, transforming him into a legend. Letters, whispered tales, and reports of his extraordinary skill spread to other towns and even neighboring states. Musicians, patrons, and curious listeners sought him out, eager to experience firsthand the child who could play like Mozart. This growing reputation helped preserve his story, ensuring that it would not fade into obscurity despite the societal challenges and racial barriers he faced. Each retelling of his performances reinforced the sense that he was exceptional, not only in skill, but in the profound emotional resonance he brought to every composition he touched. The lasting legacy of his music was not limited to recognition of his technical abilities. It lay also in the profound emotional impact he had on his listeners. Accounts describe people moved to tears, deeply contemplative, or profoundly inspired by his playing. His music carried a universality that transcended language, class, and race, connecting with listeners on a level that few performers could achieve, regardless of age or background. The silent piano prodigy's artistry demonstrated that music could convey the deepest aspects of human experience, a lesson that resonated across communities and generations. Furthermore, his story has continued to influence historical and cultural understanding of talent in the antebellum South. In a period when Black individuals, especially children, were often denied opportunities to explore or develop their abilities, his achievements served as a powerful counter-narrative. He demonstrated that genius could not be constrained by societal prejudice, that innate skill and passion could flourish even in the face of systemic obstacles. Modern musicians, historians, and enthusiasts who study his life see in his early achievements a blueprint for how talent, when nurtured and recognized, can overcome adversity and leave an indelible mark on culture and history. The boy's enduring legacy is also reflected in the inspiration he provided for subsequent generations of Black musicians. By demonstrating excellence in a world that sought to limit him, he became a symbol of possibility, showing that mastery of an art form was attainable regardless of social or racial constraints. Young pianists, composers, and performers who came after him could look to his life as proof that exceptional talent could flourish despite systemic oppression, and that artistry could command respect and admiration even in a world reluctant to grant it. Ultimately, the lasting legacy of the silent piano prodigy lies in both the beauty of his music and the courage he embodied. Every performance, every improvised passage, every expression of emotion through the keys contributed to a narrative that transcended his immediate circumstances. He was a reminder that talent and creativity are gifts meant to be nurtured and shared, and that true genius often emerges in the most unlikely places. His story continues to inspire, offering a timeless lesson that brilliance, perseverance, and the power of art can leave a mark that endures long after the performer has played the final note. In this way, the boy's legacy is not confined to history books or fleeting stories. It lives on in the music he played, the lives he touched, and the inspiration he continues to provide for anyone who dares to pursue excellence against the odds. The silent piano prodigy, though a child in 1859 Alabama, became far more than a talented musician. He became a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the enduring power of human potential.